SpongeBob 2050.
Tom Kenny will be like 100 years old and be like, let's see if he can still do the voice.
You know what'd be cool? Like if in the future they have like they figure out how to do like the decapitated head thing in like
Pardon?
Futurama.
Oh, the head in the jar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to keep everyone alive and miserable.
Well, presumably they still got Nixon clanking around there somewhere.
Yeah, didn't he get like a body at some point?
Aroo! All right, enough of that. Hey, everybody, this is Nick and Nikolai from Cometa Camera.
Hello.
I'm Nick. That's Nikolai over
That's
there.
me.
And this is Camera Academy, where we talk about, among other things,
Camera stuff.
photography, and we try and impart a little bit of knowledge upon you, the listening audience. Thank you for joining us today on Camera Academy, and today we're going to be talking about third-party lenses. And that's a pretty interesting subject because a lot of people will hear the word third-party
Be like, ooh, no.
and they'll automatically assume that we're talking about knockoff lenses or counterfeits or, really cheap, crummy brands.
Yeah, the term third-party, has a bad rep most of the time.
It does. But you know what doesn't have a bad rep? Cometa Camera, which is available on cometa.com. And also you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Yelp and Google reviews and all that stuff. And if you like the sound of our dulcet tones, then give us a nice review online so that we can bring you more of these wonderful podcasts.
Yep. Just search
and also
Cometa
keep us in business.
Just search Cometa Camera on whichever platform and we will pop up.
Yeah. And if you have any questions or suggestions about the show, or if you just have any, camera photography related stuff, hit us up and we'll do our best to get back to you ASAP.
Yes, sir.
Yep. We're sort of like a mom and pop business over here, so we try and do our best to engage as much with our customers as possible. And also, speaking of mom and pop, we are a local business. We have a little brick and mortar store in Amityville, New York. Did I say that right? Amityville, as you may have heard of that town.
Yeah.
It is a movie based on
that spooky town.
Yep.
It's not that spooky.
No, it isn't. Although it seems like no one ever holds on to that house for very long.
It is true.
Yeah. But anyway, come visit us on Long Island in New York.
Yes.
Yep. Want to get to the show?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so let's talk about third-party lenses. Now, when you buy a specific brand of camera, whether it's Canon or Nikon or Panasonic or Sony, whatever, naturally you go out and you buy lenses of the same brand.
Yes.
Obviously, number one, they're compatible, and number two, they, that they're all the features, and especially things like autofocus, the things that you really rely on, you definitely know those things are going to work. However, there's plenty of cases where a third-party lens by a manufacturer other than Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, Sony, etc. might be right for you. And there's lots of different third-party manufacturers out there.
Yep, the most well-known will probably be Sigma.
Yep.
You got Tamron.
Yep.
You got, actually, Zeiss makes lenses for everything, too.
Yeah. And most of these companies have been around for quite a long time. Even if you've never heard of them before, Sigma's been around since 1961, right? Sigma's a Japanese company, so for a while you probably never saw any of their stuff stateside, but they've been definitely making inroads over the last decade or so, and now they're producing some really high-quality stuff.
Very high-quality stuff.
Tamron's another Japanese company. They've been around since 1950. Fun fact, Sony Corporation actually owns 12% of Tamron.
Did not know that.
Interesting. And Zeiss, like you mentioned, that's the oldest optics manufacturer probably in the world.
Yeah.
Definitely the oldest lens manufacturer, and they've been around since 1846 over in Germany, and they produce probably the highest quality, or at least the most out of my price range lenses in existence.
Although they do have some more affordable ones now too.
Yeah.
Plus, I think Sony has a contract with them too, right? Like their G Masters and stuff like that, or like Zeiss glass.
Sony licenses the name, and they also manufacture their lenses according to Zeiss's specifications.
Okay, gotcha.
But Zeiss does not produce those lenses.
Gotcha.
So they're made in Sony factories in wherever, Japan or Thailand or wherever the heck Sony makes their stuff, but it's made under the guidance of Zeiss.
Gotcha.
What about Samyang?
Samyang, Rokinon.
which is the same company, actually.
Yeah, it's just-
that one's based in Korea. They've been around for quite a few decades.
Who else?
Tokina,
Tokina. Yep.
which we haven't carried in a little while,
Yeah.
but that's another Japanese brand that's been around for quite some time.
I think Vivitar makes some lenses too.
They make a few lenses, like universal T-mount lenses.
Yeah.
You've got Opteka, Yongnuo. There's a few other.
Yongnuo, yeah.
There's a few other Chinese brands that are just sort of coming around that make low-cost lenses. A lot of them with like crazy shallow depths of field that you can get on eBay for like $100 or whatever. But we'll get to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then also just because I do a lot of used stuff for the company here too. Like every now and then, I saw a J.C. Penney lens, like an old film lens. I was like, J.C. Penney.
Yeah.
It's like, when did J.C. Penney make lenses? I had to actually go to Enzo and ask him about it. And
Those
he was like,
department
they used to
stores,
make it.
yeah, JCPenney, Sears, they used to make all kinds of things that were compatible with other products.
Yeah.
I remember my very first computer was a Sears brand computer, or it was like, I think it was called a Laser, and it came from Sears. It was like a
okay.
Sears exclusive, and it was an IBM compatible. No, or a Apple II compatible computer, but the only place you could get it was Sears, and I imagine JCPenney was kind of the same way.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of bizarre, but they definitely existed for quite a time in this great nation of ours.
So, you ever want to get a J.C. Penney lens, search the used department.
All right, so before we get into the advantages of third-party lenses, I'm just going to do a quick little test of ASMR over here. I'm gonna drink the rest of my Diet Pepsi out of this. Or Diet Cola. I don't want to be.
Yeah. We're not sponsored. You gotta shake the ice cubes around by the mic.
Delicious.
ASMR.
Should we move on?
Yeah.
All right. So, what are some advantages of third-party lenses? I mean, the most obvious one is that they're cheaper.
Cheaper, pretty much.
You're going to be paying less money for basically what amounts to equivalent specifications.
Yeah.
The same focal range, the same aperture, maximum aperture, things like that. Those specifications that really matter, you'll be able to get third-party lenses for less money in most cases. Why is that? Because they don't spend as much money on marketing, for one.
Yep, number one, and that they need to lower. In order for them to sell that, they need to have it at a lower selling price than the name brand.
Those manufacturers won't be able to compete with, like, if you have a 70 to 200 lens, one's made by Canon, one's made by a third party here. Who's going to need to? The third party brand is going to have to be cheaper just for them to be able to sell it.
Yeah, and just like base, like 70 to 200 2.8 with image stabilization built into it. Like, I think Nikon's one available, like the cheapest one available is what, like $2,000 now?
As a matter of fact, I have a
have a
whole
chart?
list of stuff over here because I wanted to bring this up. Well, hang on now. I only have the Canon list. Damn it.
Well, we'll start with Canon.
But you're probably right. All right.
Yeah, the Canon 7200 2.8 IS2 when I bought it was like $2,200, $2,400 or something like that.
Yep. Right now, I mean, it's $2,100. And that's the latest, IS3 USM version. That's $2,100. If you wanted to get an equivalent Sigma lens with those exact kind of specifications and the same capability, you'd be spending $1,500.
Yeah, so that's $600 cheaper.
Right. And with that $600, you either pocket that or
Buy
put it
another
towards
lens.
like a prime lens or something,
Or a flash.
Or a flash.
Or something like that.
So therein lies one of the main advantages of getting a third-party lens is it's not going to be as much money. Now, like I said before, yes, some of that is because of the marketing, because of the fact that they have to sell those things less, but also, in general, a lot of the third-party manufacturers will use, I don't want to say cheaper components, but cheaper components.
Yeah.
Tamron, for example, makes a lot of really nice lenses, but they also use a lot of plastic in their lenses, where stuff from the name brands like Canon and Nikon or Sony, they'll use a lot more metal, magnesium. They'll weather seal their lenses, things that you might not get in Sigma or Tamron, but
Again, there might be things you don't need.
they might be things you don't need. Some of those lenses that like that lens you just mentioned, that Canon 70-200, maybe that lens is overkill for some people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially with that price tag.
But you want that 2.8 and that IS still.
Exactly. So you can get equivalent specs, and if the performance is pretty much equal in most ways that count, maybe it's not everything that the Canon lens or the Nikon lens could be, but if it's most things, then maybe that's worth $600 to you.
Exactly.
Another good thing about third-party lenses is that you can get them for different cameras, for different mounts.
Yes.
Right? So if you were to buy a Sigma lens and you say, hey, I really like the quality of this lens, and you've got different cameras, you can get that lens for different cameras. Or if you switch systems, you know, you can get the same lens for a completely different camera, and you know that the optical quality is going to be the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
And even if you look at Sigma in particular, they have a mount conversion service.
Oh, that's right, they do.
Where you can keep your lens. If you like your lens, you can keep your lens, and you can get it switched over to a different mount. So, Sigma offers most lenses in Canon, Nikon, and their own mount, their own proprietary mount, and then they have primes for Sony E-mount as well. You can get all those switched out. It costs a little. I mean, they don't do it for free.
Yeah, but it's not as much as buying a whole new lens.
Right, or having to go and sell your lens and then get it back, and you never know how much you're losing on it. Another thing that's really good about third-party lenses is because they have to compete with the name brands, they tend to offer more options. They'll come out with more focal lengths, more kind of
just like obscure ones that that aren't like on the norm.
Yeah. So I think Sigma, for example, makes like an 8mm fisheye, right? Which you wouldn't be able to get from one of the name brands. They don't really have a market for that.
Yeah, I think they drop like a 30mm too.
Yeah.
So it's like
Sigma's been coming out with all these prime lenses that are like within 5mm of each other.
Yeah.
You know, which is kind of a bizarre thing. If you look at a normal lens lineup, you're not going to see all those different types of lenses, but
you usually see 24, 35, 50, 85, 105. Those are usually your primes.
Right. But some of the third-party manufacturers will make stuff that doesn't exist because they need to fill that niche. They need to go, wherever there's a void in the first-party manufacturer's lineup, that's where the third-party will come in and try and fill that little niche so that, they're making something that didn't exist before, and maybe the big companies don't think it's worth it.
Correct.
So that's another advantage. Another thing that I like about third-party lenses, well, this doesn't really qualify anymore. I was going to say a lot of the times they're lighter because they use cheaper components or more plastic or maybe less glass. But that's not always the case anymore now, is it? Thanks to Sigma.
Sigma basically created, I guess we'll get into it later, or you want to get into it now?
No, it's fine.
Art line.
Let's go into it now.
Sigma kind of has like two levels, kind of like Canon has like two levels. You have like the standard like USM, STM lenses, and then you got their L series.
Right.
The L series is exceptionally heavier because they have more elements in them. It's higher grade materials, weather sealing, stuff like that.
You can think of it kind of like, Toyotas and Lexus. Same company. There's one line that's, above and beyond the other ones.
So Sigma's got like their standard line, and then they have their art line, which is they pack like elements and like all that kind of stuff in them, and actually they are quite a bit heavier than even like the name brand version.
I think they're the way they put it in person to me was size and weight be damned.
Yeah.
They were like, we're going to make these things as crisp and clear and free of distortion as possible, and it doesn't matter how heavy they get.
Yeah, I bought a 14-24 Sigma for my Nikon system. The lens is gorgeous. Like the pictures I get with it gorgeous, but the lens is heavier than the camera body.
Yep. I have Sigma's 85mm 1.4 art lens, and the thing is a tank.
Yes.
And I compare that to the because I shoot with Sony. If I was to compare that to the 85mm 1.8, even their G Master 1.4 is lighter than the Sigma, and it's just while I appreciate the sharpness and the quality of that lens, man, is it heavy.
It's a big boy.
Yeah. But if we talk about other manufacturers, we talk about Tamron, for example. They're the most prime example, I would say. They definitely
see what you did there.
wah, prime lens pun. Tamron definitely makes stuff that's a little bit lighter and easier to carry around. The most popular example being the Sony E-mount lens that came out last year. It's a 28 to 75 2.8, and you compare that against the 2.8 24 to 70 that Sony came out with. It's like half the weight.
Yeah. And that
very similar specs.
That might be a selling point for you.
Oh, it definitely is, because that G Master lens is super heavy. It's beautiful, great lens, but it's also like 3 times the cost of the Tamron.
Yeah.
And if you're just looking for the low light capability of a 2.8, maybe that Tamron works great for you. And it's a good quality lens. It's not like, I was using this analogy with someone who came into the store very recently, and a lot of this stuff comes back to cars for me because I happen to be a car enthusiast.
Car guy.
I'm a car guy. But I was talking to someone and they're like, I don't know if I want this lens. It's a Tamron, I really want to get a Nikon.
I was like, why?
And I said, the Nikon is really nice, but you can get double the focal length, and because she was going on a safari.
Yeah.
And she wanted to take pictures of animals from very far away. I'm like, look, you can get a really, really long focal length, and you're going to spend less money, and you can get it with this Tamron. She's like, yeah, but Tamron, I never even heard of that brand. I said, look, remember when Kia and Hyundai used to make really garbage cars, and now they make really nice cars? That's kind of the way that like Tamron and Sigma have come along. Like, they used to be kind of, lacking of reliability, and they'd kind of fall apart and whatever. But now that we all have this, like, everything's made with robots, and we've got all the technology more that we can shake a stick at, then Tamron's lenses are like, the new Kias and Hyundais, where they last for 10 years and you don't even have to change the oil.
Exactly.
Like, I
remember when I first started photography, like my first telephoto lens for my Canon XTI was
70 to 300 DI?
70 to 300.
Yeah.
And that thing,
they had the same lens.
That thing focused so slow.
Yep.
And I mean, it was accurate, but it was like beep beep, and that's like that was how long it took to focus. But you know what? The lens cost me what, $120, $150, something like that for my first telephoto lens. I got the fundamentals on how to shoot telephoto on that lens, and when I was done with it, I sold it. And then I got, the Canon 75 to 300, which
they
was a
still
lot
make
better.
that lens, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's the optical quality of that lens is actually really nice.
It is.
Yeah, it doesn't have image stabilization, but for like $100, $120 or whatever it is, and it's
great to start out with.
It's just as like nice as, optically speaking, as a Nikon or Canon version of it. And, I don't want to say it's like a throwaway thing, but
I gotcha.
It's something that it's a starter lens, and it works great for what it is.
But then, just because of that experience, like the Tamron was like my first one, and like, like, oh yeah, Tamron, it's just like they kind of like, I would never get a Tamron.
I know, now you're above
again.
it, right?
But no, surprisingly, like, I get a couple of, products across my desk, like used ones, like people are, selling. I got one of the Tamron, I think it was the 100 to 150, or I think it was something like that. Or is that a Sigma? No,
Sigma makes the 50 to 100.
50 to 100. I tested that lens. No, I got the Tamron like 70 to 200 version.
Okay.
It was for
They very recently made like their professional trio.
Yeah.
Right. So they have the 70 to 24 to 70, a 70 to 200, and like a 17 to 35, I think it is. And they made them all with a 2.8, and they made them all like really high quality. And they're all really nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what Tamron I tested though then, because it was a couple months ago, but it was a zoom.
Yep.
And I was like really surprised at the quality of it. Like, it felt like a nice solid lens, quick autofocus, and it just really impressed me.
So yeah, these brands, although you may not have heard of them, or they don't spring to your mind when you first think about, when you want to get a new lens for your camera, you should always consider them, because you might be able to find exactly the specs that you want and the quality that you need, and you don't have to overpay for them.
Yeah.
This is not to say that you should avoid the lenses from your your camera's manufacturer, because in most cases those are going to be the most compatible with your camera.
Yes.
And lest we forget that Canon, Nikon, Sony, they make cheap lenses too.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just make expensive stuff. They also make the kit lenses. They make the $150 prime lenses that you can get amazing quality out of. So there's a low, a kind of a bottom of the market there for the first party manufacturers as well. It's just that the third parties, they offer lower prices on stuff that is more advanced.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest advantage of that, is that you can get those specs for a lot less money. And there's a few things that you have to trade off on, but for a lot of people it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we talked about all of the good things about third-party lenses. Let's talk about some of the disadvantages. I mean, the main thing that we've been kind of dancing around this whole time has been like build quality.
Yeah, again, it's like they use cheap materials to make the lens more cost efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Plastic parts where, on the name brand you would probably see, metal or better quality stuff.
Yeah, or like the name brand one will go with magnesium instead of an aluminum barrel or something like that.
Maybe like the weather sealing won't be on the lens, like the comparison to the name brand.
Yep. Autofocus algorithms aren't like built into they have to reverse engineer all this stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe the autofocus doesn't work as well as an equivalent lens from the name brand.
But like again, from like if you're just a hobbyist versus like a professional, it's like it might not be that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But like I can specifically say when I shoot low light concerts and stuff like that, like I've tried to use a Sigma before, and this was a while ago. This wasn't like their art line or anything, but I used like a 50 mil 1.8 or something like that, and it just did not work. It's like the focusing was nowhere near as fast as the Canon was.
Yeah. And I will, I'll concur with that I've got, the 85 millimeter Sigma, and comparing that with the equivalent Sony version, the Sony's faster.
Yep.
It just is. And the Sony's lighter too. But, those are some of the things that you trade off. And, like I said before, Sigma has no care about, they give no Fs when it comes to the weight and, speed of their lenses.
Yeah,
their art lenses.
They want
anyway.
their their high quality.
Right.
No, their art lenses are actually very fast now. Their art line is like the L line or the G line.
Yeah.
That's what their art series is.
Well, they also have their zooms, and their zooms have two levels now. So it's like they have the contemporary, which is the cheaper one,
and then
they've got the sports,
which has the better
autofocus speed, all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking at Sigma and you're looking for a professional level lens, look for the sports one. They're brand new 70 to 200 2.8.
Yep.
Outstanding.
That 100, what was it? The 100 to 500? That thing is awesome.
That one's is that an older one? I think it's an older one.
Yeah, it was like one of their first like sport / contemporary lenses that came out. It was 150 to 600 maybe.
Yes, that's
what I'm
it.
thinking of.
150 to 600.
Yeah, it's just like the compactness of that and the ability to go to like 600 millimeters is awesome.
Yeah,
in that
and
package.
the range you were getting, and
yes.
But yes, that was about as heavy as a cinder block.
Yeah.
Cool lens though. All right, so what about image quality when it comes to these lenses? I mean, it varies, of course, because you've got sort of the top of the heap of the third-party lenses, which is like Sigma's art line, and then you've got your bottom of the barrel scraping eBay trash that you get for $90, and you're like, it has a maximum aperture of 0.9 or whatever, and it the depth of field is amazing, but the image quality is trash, and it's the chromatic aberration jumps out of the images and slaps you in the face.
Yes, but with like Sigma and like Tamron and things like that now, they're not gonna have any kind of disadvantages like that.
Yeah.
I mean, to the average hobbyist and enthusiast, you're not gonna really see a huge image quality difference between a third party and a name brand.
Mm-hmm.
I myself, I have a Nikon camera. For my Nikon system, I have a 14 to 24 2.8 Sigma, very wide lens. I have used the 14 to 24 with the Nikon before, and just with my bare eye, I can see a little bit of a difference in image quality.
Yeah.
Not until I start blowing up the image 100%. Like if I would just look at it on the LCD, it's like I can't tell a difference.
It's negligible.
Yeah, but if I start zooming in and editing and stuff like that, then I can see a little bit of an image quality difference.
And then the question you have to ask yourself is whether it's worth double the cost.
Exactly.
For me, if I was to get myself a wide-angle zoom, I probably wouldn't get the super high-quality version. I'd probably go for either the F4 or I'd go for the third-party because I don't shoot wide-angle very often.
Exactly.
And I don't really think that it would provide much for me, personally speaking.
Yeah, and also you got to think of, it's like, how often are you going to use that lens?
True.
Just like if you're, let's say you're a freelance or whatever, and like all the time, like mostly your 24 to 70, your 70-200s on your camera, that might be worth getting the name brand.
Right.
But if you just like every once in a while popping out a super wide angle or a super telephoto or something like that, and you rarely use it,
Yep.
it's like that's when you might want to think about getting, the off-brand, the third party.
Yep.
Like me, I like using my primes with my Nikon mainly just because I like that camera to be lightweight, compact, and I like the extra sharpness because, as previous podcasts as we talked about, prime lenses are usually always sharper than a zoom lens.
Yep.
But every now and then I want something extra wide, and that's what I got the 14 to 24 for.
Yeah, and it's a perfectly acceptable lens, and you saved a lot of money by going with the Sigma over the Nikon version.
Yeah.
And in the end, you're not going to be really wanting for the extra whatever it is, sharpness or
I mean, like when
specific qualities that come with the expensive Nikon version of it.
Yeah, I just mainly do
Wide-angle
post-process work in Lightroom. I have a couple of like editing programs like On One software, and it sharpens the image up to exactly the way I want it. So
now, some of the image quality differences that people are really harp on is sharpness. I don't really see too much of a difference in sharpness with a lot of different lenses, with the equivalent third-party version of it, especially if we're talking about Sigma and Tamron. Those are usually pretty high quality when it comes to actual sharpness. It's the other types of little differences that kind of jump out to me, like bokeh quality.
Or like vignetting in the corners.
Vignetting, sharpness around the corners. Or distortion, right?
Yeah.
Distortion's a big one because that usually requires a lot of high-grade optical equipment, and if you're getting the cheaper, lighter third-party version, that's something that might crop up more often than not. Yeah. And because you're using a third-party lens, your camera won't automatically compensate for it in your JPEGs.
Yes, but if I don't know if it works in JPEGs. I don't think I've ever tested it in the RAW. But since Sigma and Tamron mainly Sigma and Tamron, since they are like popular third-party lenses,
right?
They actually have profiles in Lightroom.
Ah.
So you import those to Lightroom, depending on the lens, and it usually will just automatically recognize it, and you can do a lens adjustment profile on it, and it will usually fix all of those issues.
Okay.
But if you're not shooting, if you're not the kind of shooter that's using Lightroom, like if you're a hobbyist or an enthusiast and you're just shooting like straight JPEGs or something like that, that's something also you might want to consider before you go third party.
Got it. All right. So one of the other things that is a sort of a downside to third party lenses is that not only are they not always compatible with all your camera's features, but in order to keep them up to date, you got to download firmware.
Yes.
It's kind of actually a benefit that you can download firmware, but it's something that if you're getting your top of the line lens made for your camera by your camera manufacturer, it's something that you don't have to really think about and consider. And some of the times, third-party lenses also require calibration in order to get the best quality out of them as possible. And Sigma and Tamron both provide sort of attachments to your computer so that you can do this.
Yeah, like USB docks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you can basically micro-adjust yourself your focusing point. Because I do tech support here. I'll get lenses across every now and then where people were saying that the focus was off. It was front focusing or back focusing. And they're right. But they didn't get like the USB dock or anything to adjust it. or they didn't want to adjust it, which is completely understandable.
Or they didn't know about it.
It's like me personally, I don't ever want to adjust a lens because the thing with me is I'm diabetic, so my vision changes constantly.
Oh, I see.
Like
Yep.
micro, depending on my blood sugar. It's like very small, but being a photographer, I notice it.
Okay.
So I heavily rely on
the,
I heavily rely on autofocus.
All right, so that's interesting. Did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, I knew about the diabetic part, but I
Yeah.
didn't know about the micro adjusting part. That's an interesting thing to
Yeah, if
consider.
my blood sugar goes high, my vision can get blurry. If it goes low, it can get blurry.
Another thing that is sort of a downside is when you go to resell your lens, you're not going to get as much money as you would if you were selling a first-party lens.
Correct.
So if you walk into Cometa Camera and you sell us a Tamron lens or a Sigma lens, we're going to probably not give you as much of a trade-in as you would if you sold us a Sony lens or a Canon lens.
It's like, what was that? Was that Pawn Stars?
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you $20. It
No.
was worth $1,000. Best I can do is 50.
Hey, I got to make it a profit on this lens, you know?
I mean, it's true. We have to clean it up. We have to, rebox it, and sometimes it's a process to use.
Right. But in the end, what I'm saying is that it's the same thing with the car analogy, right? When you go to trade in your car.
As soon as you drive the car off the lot, it's like reduced by like $10,000 or something like that, right?
But if you're trading in, a well-maintained Honda, you're going to get a lot more than if you sell that well-maintained Hyundai.
I'll give you $50.
You're not getting $50 for my
The
car.
tires are worth $50 each.
So
All right, $60.
That's something you have to deal with. I would probably advise that unless you're going to plan on keeping your third-party lens for a long time, or unless it's one of those super cheap ones that you just want to mess around with, you might want to consider the name brand lens instead, so that you can, get some money back when you're ready to upgrade.
Exactly.
If you are ready to upgrade, but and then there's the lack of availability of third-party lenses for certain camera bodies. So if you shoot with Fujifilm, if you shoot with Panasonic, Pentax, Olympus, and even Sony, you're going to have some trouble finding the focal lengths and the specific features that you want. It's a little bit harder, and even Sigma and Tamron don't really offer all that much.
Yeah.
If you're shooting with Fuji, surprisingly, Zeiss offers more lenses for Fuji than either Sigma or Tamron does.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I say, where are you going with that? I'm pretty sure Fuji had like a pretty decent lineup, but yeah, like third party.
Yeah, if you're going third party, it's going to be hard to find.
Opteka actually has some pretty decent like manual zoom, like manual operation lenses for them.
There's a lot of manual lenses out there that are pretty cheap, and that's something, one other advantage I was going to get into. But yeah, Opteka is one of them, and they're just, really super cheap optics, just a few elements, and they're very, very inexpensive in most cases, and they're just kind of good to mess around with. I don't know, stuff, portraits, macro things.
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think again, like there was a Fujifilm lens I got. It was a Opteka like super wide / fisheye lens.
Yep.
And it was like $100, and like a fisheye of that, because it did have good quality. Like the elements were nice, the coatings on it were nice.
Yeah.
Pictures came out pretty good, but the zoom ring was super stiff. Like you had to like really like work it, and yeah, you just had to manually expose everything on it.
But for the amount of times that you're going to shoot a fisheye image,
Exactly.
so that's probably a good idea.
I actually also did want to mention something else. I don't know if Sony does it, but back onto the firmware stuff that we had to like update the lenses and stuff for third party.
Yeah.
Fujifilm, you update your lenses firmware
Through the camera body,
through the
right?
camera body.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Sony does that too.
I don't think the lenses have firmware at these, I mean, I guess they must, right?
Yeah.
But I've never heard of updating them.
Yeah, I've updated my firmware on one of my lenses through my Fujifilm camera. I thought that never seen that before. I think Nikon can do it too on their newer cameras, but don't quote me on that.
I won't. Basically what I'm saying there was, if you want third-party lenses, the best case scenario is that you shoot with Canon or Nikon, maybe Sony.
Or Fuji. Well, not Fuji.
No,
like you
what I'm
said.
saying is not Fuji.
Yeah, not Fuji.
Panasonic shooters, Fuji, Olympus. If you're shooting Micro Four Thirds, you're going to have trouble finding something from Sigma or Tamron. They do have a few. Those formats, Micro Four Thirds format, actually has a lot of video lens selection out there.
Yeah, because that's your main 4K cameras right there.
Yeah, so you'll be able to find a lot of stuff for Micro Four Thirds for video lenses, but not so much for still lenses.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to mention as far as downsides go, the older stuff that you can get from third-party manufacturers is all kind of,
yeah.
Like we mentioned at the top of the show, Sigma, Tamron, even Tokina, their quality has gone up in the last few years. Yeah, really like exponentially over the last few years. When Sigma started introducing their art line, that's when Tamron sort of stepped up their game as well. And I'm not really too familiar with Tokina because we don't carry them anymore. But and then Zeiss has always been there, has always been high quality. But a lot of the older stuff from Sigma and Tamron is kind of iffy when it comes to quality. I don't know how the reliability is. Probably not so hot.
I had a 50 millimeter Sigma for my Canon because the Canon 50 millimeter 1.4, I think it was.
Yep.
Like their version 1 was god awful. Like the focusing was like just so bad on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried the Sigma, but ironically at Cometa Camera back in the day before I worked here. And the focusing was like so much faster on it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get this. Lo and behold, I'm shooting some stuff and I'm comparing like white balances between my Canon lens and when I switched to the Sigma, and the white balance was just like all off on the Sigma.
It's funny how the lens can change the color so much.
Yeah, it's the coatings, I'm assuming.
Something.
But yeah, you just have to be careful of things like that. But that's on the older stuff. Like I said, all the newer stuff I've tried that come across my desk is perfect. I never had too many issues with anything.
And it's funny, we really don't see many returns of Sigma or Tamron or any sort of third-party lenses due to the fact that they don't like it.
Yeah.
Usually it's people who are returning lenses are either renting a lens via Amazon, or they're just, returning something that they expected more from for the price that they paid.
Exactly.
And usually that doesn't happen when you buy a Sigma or Tamron lens, because what you're there's the old axiom, you get what you pay for. And if you're paying less, maybe you're not expecting so much out of a third-party lens. But in my recent experience, every time I've used a Sigma or Tamron lens, I've always been very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, but if you're planning to if you think that the $1,500 version 7200 2.8 is going to work the same as the name brand $2,500 2.8, it's just not going to be exactly the same.
It won't be the same. Now, I'm actually interested in testing this lens. We don't have enough in stock to take one out and play with it.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in trying the 7200 2.8 from Sigma, the sports version, and see how it stacks up to the equivalent Canon and Nikon versions.
Yeah, like I said, I have the Canon version if you want to test the Canon versus, if you want to do a comparison. And I think you have the 70-200 G Master for the Sony, right?
Yeah, they don't have a Sony one yet.
Sony one yet.
They don't have any Sony zooms yet. And there's one of the downsides for me. I would love
availability.
I would love to be able to get a wide-angle zoom from Sigma, like the one you've got for your Nikon.
Yeah.
But they don't
make it yet.
They don't make it yet. And I don't know if they will. So far, Sigma says they have no plans, but who knows?
Get on that, Danielle.
I guess that's about it. So third-party lenses can be a great way to save money on your gear. You can often get the focal lengths and the specifications that you want, and you can spend a lot less money and you don't have too many trade-offs.
Yeah.
Like we mentioned, Sigma has been making really great lenses, especially their prime lenses. While they are heavy AF, they are excellent lenses optically, and you won't spend as much money as you would on the equivalent name brand. I don't say name brand. Sigma's a name. It's just not one of the camera body names.
And then if you're really nervous about between getting a name brand and a third party, There's websites out there where you can rent lenses, like borrowlenses.com.
Yep.
You rent it for a weekend, try it out, see if you like it as much as if you already own like the name brand, or you're looking for like a second version of it for your second body if you're a pro. Also, if you have any local camera shops, like if you're local to here, in Long Island, come down to our store and, test them out. If you got camera stores by you, test them out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best way to do it.
So, the overall advice here is that try these lenses out. Don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid just because you shoot Canon and the lens doesn't say Canon on it and it doesn't match your camera the way you expect it to, doesn't mean that it's not going to work for you.
Yeah.
It may work better than you expected. And you can use that extra money to go towards other lenses, or if you save $600 on a lens, get yourself a nice prime. Or if you spend $500 less on a prime, then when you go to buy that 70 to 200, get the 2.8 instead of the f4. Use it to upgrade your other photography gear. And like Nikolai over here mentioned earlier, figure out what you're going to be using your lenses for, because if you're not going to be using them a ton and it's not one of those things that you rely on a daily basis to make money or whatever, maybe you don't need to get the latest and greatest L series, G Master, whatever the name brand is. Nikon doesn't have like a brand, do they, for their high-end stuff?
I don't think they really have a name for it. It's just like you have to know it by like the aperture or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like these are the ones that are really expensive.
Yeah,
that's all you need to know. So that's pretty much it. That's our advice on third-party lenses. Give them a try. They're not bad, most of them. Actually, there's actually a lot of junk out there, but the main manufacturers you shouldn't have to worry about.
Yes.
They do make some really great stuff, and
make sure it's the newer stuff.
Yeah. But hey, give it a try. See if it works for you. You may just surprise yourself and save a lot of money in the process. Right?
Right.
All right. So until next time, keep shooting your third-party lenses just like we will, and we'll fix it in post.
Yes.
We'll fix all that chromatic aberration in post.
Yes.
From those old third-party lenses that we don't want to use anymore. Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.